That's right. You're being broadcast all over the universe. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Thank you.
Now you look presentable.
Flying small. Ooh, it's loud. Haven't done this for a long time.
Yeah.
Woo. When was the last time we had a Sunday school class in here? It's been a couple of years anyway. It's been 3 years? Wow. Yeah. This brings back some memories. So, well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. We're going to be in Esther chapter 6, starting chapter 6. We're going to do part 1 today. But before we do, let's open in a word of prayer this morning. Lord, you're so good to us. You teach us and you point us in different directions. Sometimes you show us how wise, how sovereign, how good you really are. Like in a chapter like this, where things don't look good for the protagonists of our story here, but all of a sudden we see your hand. We see your hand at work, and Lord, we just ask that your hand would continue to work in the lives of those around us, those who aren't saved, our kids, Lord, our families, people who need Christ. I pray for those who are going to be at service later on this morning, Lord, that if there's someone here who doesn't know Christ as their Savior, that they would trust in Him today for the forgiveness of their sins. Now be with us through this time. Lord, thank you again for your goodness to us in all things. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Yes, Esther chapter 6. And, like I mentioned during the prayer, I love this story. Up until now, things look desperate, for our heroes. You have Esther, despite gaining an audience with the king, against all odds. She doesn't seem, like Danny talked about last week, she went in, she invites the king and Haman to a banquet, and they go to the banquet, and the king is expecting her to say something, and she says, you wonder, why did she just invite them back for another banquet? Did she not have the nerve to say anything? What's going to become of Esther and Mordecai and all the Jews? At this point, there seems to be no hope. So anyways, I love this chapter, but you have two perspectives when you start out, when you think about this, two desperate men. You have Mordecai, and I've got this Psalm 109 verses 2 and 3 here. This personifies Mordecai. For the mouth of the wicked and the mouth of the deceitful are opened against me. They have spoken against me with a lying tongue. They compassed me about also with words of hatred and fought against me without a cause. Here you have Mordecai. Okay, his co-workers squealed to Haman, that he wouldn't, because of his Jewishness, Mordecai refused to bow down and worship Haman, which is what Haman wanted. Now Mordecai is the cause of the soon-to-be destruction of the Jews, and there's no way you can change it. The laws of the Medes and the Persians, can't be changed. So, all because he did the right thing. The right thing, you don't worship men, you worship God. That's what he wanted to do. He did the right thing. What happened? Now he's the cause of all this trouble. How was he handling this? There's nothing else he can do. He asked Esther, help. You're the queen. You got to help here. And he and all the Jews in the city, as well as Esther and all of her entourage, they're fasting and praying. Haman's attitude. Near the end of Esther chapter 5, he says, all the glory, he's been invited to the banquet, just he and the king by the queen. He is the king's seemingly favorite. He says in verse 13, yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. He won't even stand up for Haman when he comes in. So he's filled with rage, his vengeance. He hates Mordecai. His entire focus is on seeing Mordecai liquidated. Haman's way of dealing? What does he do at the end of chapter 5? He whines to his friends and family. And they're going to tell him what he wants to hear. He says, I can't, if Mordecai's around, I can't, wait. He gets like this. So, they tell him what he wants to hear. Let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Ooh, Haman's, I like that idea. So what's he going to do now? I don't know. Anyone ever had somebody out to get you? Or it seems like somebody's been out to get you? Yeah, I had a guy in high school, for whatever reason, John Carrier was his name. He would come up to me in the, at the locker area, and he'd say, I want to fight you. I want to get you. And I'd look at him. He's a little guy. I'd look at him. Why? He says, I don't like you. I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you. So what do? You go tell a teacher. What's the teacher going to say? Man up. Come on, kid. What's the matter with you? What are you going to fight the guy? I don't want to fight the guy. Anyways. So long story short, you don't know what to do. What do you do? Nothing ever happened, but the thought that someone's out to get you, doesn't it bother you? Someone's, why do they have something against me? What did I ever do to them? So, but these things happen sometimes. Somebody you work with, anyways, it's very unsettling. That's sort of the position that Mordecai is in. He didn't really do anything to Haman. Haman just doesn't like him. So, but Esther, chapter 6. Here you have, this is, the story starts to pivot. God's sovereignty, you sort of saw it when Esther got picked as queen. But now, God's sovereignty over the entire matter is beginning to be revealed here. And nobody in the story imagines chapter 6 happening when you think about it. Mordecai and Esther are fasting and praying. Esther had the banquet for the king and Haman, but she didn't tell the king why she had the banquet. She sort of held off. God's hand is in this. Is he the one that kept her from saying anything? She just says, oh, come back tomorrow for another feast. So you have this day here, had the feast, oh, come back tomorrow. Now you've got a period of time. Anybody ever criticize Esther in the back of your mind for being a procrastinator? I did. When I first read the story, I'm thinking, why? Esther, come on, out with it. So, says the king of procrastinators, by the way. You don't have to agree. So, and Haman, what is he doing? He's whining about his problem. And if you remember back in the story, Jezebel and Ahab was sulking because he couldn't get Naboth's vineyard. I can't get the vineyard. I'm not going to eat any bread. Jezebel says, Ahab, you're the king. Let's deal with it. So she hatches a plan to get it. But anyways, same thing. Haman's wife tells Haman, build the gallows, hang Mordecai, and be done with it. And stop your whining. So his plan is set. The gallows are going to be built. And the entire city, because this is going to be gallows, these are going to be 50 feet high. And Danny mentioned last week, that's about 75 feet. That's a pretty good sized structure. 75-foot tall gallows. People are going to say, ooh, who's that for? You think about it. And so then, what's he going to do? And then he's going to speak to the king. He's going to hang Mordecai. Of course, he's going to get the king's approval, because the king would never turn Haman down. So what could go wrong? So anyways, and the way the chapter starts, insomnia, okay? If we read this, the first part of verse 1, it says, on chapter 6, it says, on that night could not the king sleep. Okay, ever had a restless night? Yeah. I don't know, part of me doesn't understand why the king had a restless night. If he just had a banquet of wine, and typically if you've been partying like that, you'll be out of it for a while. But maybe he was feeling guilty because he says, oh, Esther just came in. She is my wife, and I really haven't spent any time with her for the last month. Maybe he feels guilty. Whatever it is, he has a cure. What's your cure? Anybody have a cure for sleepless nights? Yes. Yeah? Oh, read. Okay, Terry's getting all spiritual. I read my Bible. What is it, boring to you? No, just kidding. Yeah, do you pray? So there's all kinds of cures for it. Anybody ever play solitaire? Oh boy, I'm on a winning streak. Stuff like that. But the king had a cure, something boring. Okay, in the second half of verse 1, it says, "And he," meaning the king, commanded to bring the book of records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. So official government records. Oh, that'll make you nod off. One of the things I used to do years ago was I used to read condominium documents for different condominium developments up in New Hampshire, because you had to, someone had to read through them and make sure you check off all the boxes so you could certify that yes, this project is suitable for Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae financing and all this other sort of stuff. Ever sit down with a document like that and just start reading? Okay, so my guess is the king is thinking that's what's going to happen. So whatever the case, except what ends up happening? In verse 2, "And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on the king," whatever his name is. Okay? So imagine the king's reaction when he finds out there was an assassination attempt. It sounds like he didn't know about this before. Did he know about this before? He must have been surprised by it, because he comes up asking a question. Did someone maybe keep this assassination attempt from him? I was thinking about this. Haman's the kind of guy, Haman wants to be front and center with the king all the time. So if there was an assassination attempt, it was kind of like, somebody stopped it. I don't know whether he knew it was Mordecai or not, but you know what? Let's not tell the king. Just let's keep everything smooth sailing. Just don't ruffle any feathers. So maybe it was Haman, but God's hand is here. Of all the records that would have been picked for all the years of the kings, of the Medes and the Persians and so forth, whoever picked out this thing reads it to the king. Is this God's hand or not? It's not chance. It's not like, ooh, that was lucky. No. But then verse 3, there's got to be some honor here. "And the king said, What honor and dignity hath been done to Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servant that ministered unto him, There is nothing done for him." Whoa, the king's question begs an answer. What's been done? Oh, nothing. What honor and dignity, has been done for whoever this person was? No, it's actually named who this person was, specifically for Mordecai. And the answer is, nothing's been done for him. Well, in verses 4 and 5, when you read through this, the king said, "Who was in the court?" Now Haman was come into the outward court of the king's house to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. So, the king says, let's find someone to fix this. Haman just happens to be in the court. Obviously, Haman had showed up early at the king's doorstep, probably the night before. He is just so anxious to get the king's blessing to murder Mordecai. And so in verse 6, I'm going to read down verse 5. "And the king's servant said unto him, Behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, Let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, What shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor?" Haman comes in the middle of the king's discussion with his minions, and he asks a vague question of Haman. What should be done to the king's favorite person? The king wants to honor somebody. What should I do, Haman? So, in the second half of this verse, you have the pinnacle of pride when you think about it, where it says, "Now Haman thought in his heart, To whom would the king delight to do honor more than to myself?" Wow. Now, how many verses in the Bible talk about pride and being lifted up and the dangers of pride and the blessings of humility and so forth? In this half of a verse, it's the peak of the display of pride that's been attributed to Haman. We've talked about it all through the book so far. And he was so full of pride. But there's a saying: the text without context is pretext. Okay, Haman has this preconceived notion but he's unaware of the context of the discussion. He doesn't know what's been going on. So he arrives at this catastrophic conclusion. It's like, the king is going to honor me. Wow. Okay, at this point, once again, I talked about this before at the very beginning, two perspectives, two desperate men, but two perspectives, two impatient men, when you think about it. Haman's perspective, he was so impatient to get the king's approval for his plan against Mordecai. And here he is, the king has just called me into his own room this early. Surely he is about to grant all my vengeful desires. I am obviously the king's first choice. It's me. Who else could there be? After all, think about it. The night before, Haman had just left the banquet. It's just he and the king, and they were served by Esther. What possibly could have changed? He has no idea. He just must have been so giddy with anticipation that he's going to get his way. And now the king's perspective, he was impatient to have Mordecai honored. Maybe he figured, once Mordecai gets honored, I can get that off my conscience and I'll be able to sleep. But he thinks, Haman's right here. Haman's pretty efficient. Who better to execute my plan to honor Mordecai, who, by the way, saved my life. So I owe my life to Mordecai. Who better than the efficient Haman? And it's obvious here that the king is oblivious to Mordecai's plans and his hatred of Haman's hatred of Mordecai. Get my names right here. Any comments or thoughts or questions on anything so far? Okay. Haman, he makes a presumptuous prescription. Okay, in verses 7 through 9. And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delighteth to honor, let the royal apparel be brought, which the king useth to wear, and the horse that the king rideth upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. And let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man withal, whom the king delighteth to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delighteth to honor. And when you go down through this, there's all these things. The royal apparel. Dress me up to look like the king. Ooh. Then it talks about the royal crown. With the crown, everyone will think that maybe I am the king. The royal ride. Carry me around just like the king. A lot of times people were known by, especially the king would have not just a horse, but the horse would be all fancied up with all sorts of stuff. So it's going to be the king's horse, carry me around just like the king. The royal accompaniment, surround me with princes just like the king. Okay, wow. The royal proclamation, tell everyone to honor me just like the king. And there's that expression, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck. Haman's thinking he's the duck here, because he's going to be walking and he's going to be quacking like the duck.
He would have known it was Mordecai. He would have never have suggested all.
Oh man, that's that which is going to be next week. But and I'm thinking about this, and before we condemn Haman, do we do the same thing sometimes? How many times do people? I won't say. I say we, the royal we. I can't think of anyone in particular, but do people want to look the part of royalty? Yes, Bob.
What I think Haman's thinking about, he was always in the presence of the king, but very seldom was he in the presence of the queen. So he had the first invitation, the king and the queen, look at me. Mm-hmm. And then she made a second request for the second banquet, and then the restless night. And he's just eating this all up in his mind, says, wow, the king, this must be having something to do with me because I'm being invited to all these things. And then he's asking about the man who needs to be rewarded. He's thinking, well, I do all these things for the king. It's got to be me.
And see, this is where sometimes, like, you ever go in, start watching a show and you miss the beginning, so you really have no idea what the context is. And, and you're thinking, this guy is really nice. He's a nice guy. I really like this character. And then all of a sudden you find out, oh, he's the one that murdered so-and-so at the very beginning of the show that you didn't see. That's, and that's what, Haman is so oblivious. And there's such a warning here. Number one, don't be oblivious. We really need to have the context of what we're looking at, and you can apply it to Bible reading. Jerry Papino when he sends text messages and emails and stuff like that, he puts a verse that says, "The fool has said in his heart, there is no God." And you can take that verse, part of that verse, out of context and say, there is no God. And how many times do people take things in the Bible or things that they think are in the Bible and use them out of context? Money is the root of all evil. The love of money is the root of all evil. Money, there's nothing wrong with money. You got to have it. But, there is such a thing as wanting it too much. You can lust after money. There's a lot of things that there's nothing wrong with them in some ways, but the improper use of them is wrong. So, context. Don't be oblivious. And the other part is, do we get caught up with the idea of wanting to look like royalty? Think about ads that you might see for clothing, for cars. We won't talk too much about cars. We won't talk about Lamborghinis or anything like that. But but isn't there such a thing as I've got to have this? I need to have, kids especially. When I was in high school, everyone had to have a certain kind of, you had to wear certain kinds of pants. The Hopsacks material, and that they had to be Levi's. If you wore Wranglers, yeah. Maybe that's why this guy John Carrier wanted to beat me up, because I never wore Levi's. I never had Levi's, but
Wranglers were banished.
yeah, especially the husky size. So but there was a desire on my part. Oh man, if I could only be like these other guys, and wouldn't have this kid wouldn't be picking on me, and I wouldn't have this. I could be normal, because it's normal to have the. At least I thought it was, to have this and to have this and to have this. And when I finally got a pair of penny loafers, I was like, look at my shoe. That was the thing, because we had to wear. I went to a parochial high school, and you had to wear suit coats and ties and stuff like that, and dress shoes and everything. So you had to wear stuff like this. But yeah, you get caught up in these things.
And you had to put the penny in the loafers. If you didn't put the penny in the loafers,
That's right.
you had to have the penny in there.
And if you were smart, you put a dime in your loafers, because then you could always make a phone call.
When you get beat up on the guy.
Yeah. Or if you're walking down by the store and you want to buy a Slim Jim, that's what they cost back in the day. But anyways, I kind of digress here. But there is this idea that you want to look the part. Military, don't you? Maybe it wasn't the case with you, but weren't there people that you knew that really wanted them? Maybe they were a corporal, and I'm going to look the part of the sergeant. I want to look like I'm in charge. There's always people like that. So just warnings, context, and don't fall for the for the royalty part of things. But here, the beginning of the end here, this is, I look at this, and you have the earthly application of Isaiah 14, verses 13 through 15, talking about Satan, Lucifer, where it says, "For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High." And then there's the inevitable result, "Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit." So, you have this prophetic statement. You can apply this to Haman. Here he is going to be like the Most High. And who is higher than the king? The king of the Medes and the Persians, the king of the largest empire in the world at the time. Haman is going to be just like the king. At least he thinks he's going to be just like the king. But we all, we know the rest of the story with this. But some of the things to keep in mind, before we go into any other comments or any thoughts or questions, or yes, Danny.
When you think about what Haman said, I kind of wonder what his thought process was. Dressed a person in royal apparel, put him on the king's horse with a crown, parade him around and saying, "Thus the king does and whom he delights." I wonder if in Haman's mind he wasn't thinking, well, this might give me my opportunity to step into that role of, everybody thinks when the king deceases or steps down or whatever happens, I'm the next king.
Yeah, I'm the vice king.
I am the man because the king delights in me. He's given me the royal horse. He's given me royal crown, royal apparel, walking me around in the streets of Shushan saying, "This is what the king does and whom he delights." Puts himself in that position of saying, "Hey, look at here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the next king." Just so y'all know that. I'm the next king. And whatever thought would he want to be the next king?
Yeah.
He already thought he was special because of the banquets he was invited to.
Yeah, he's and not only that, what did the king give to him before when Haman first instituted his Persian purity and prosperity plan? He gave him his ring to seal the documents with. This is the king's signature. Okay, I've had the king's ring. I can sign stuff for the king. Now, I've had the power, if you want to call it that. Now, loaded on. I'm going to be just like the king. So, yeah. He says, and not only am I going to be just like the king, was there something in the back of his mind, and this is real speculation. Do you think he had any plans to bump the king off? Who knows? Maybe he was the one those two chamberlain who Mordecai found out wanted to bump the king off, wanted to assassinate the king. Maybe they had been hired by Haman. Oh. Woo, the plot thickens. But once again, that's kind of all speculation. But yeah, here you have Haman's setting himself up, and pride cometh before fall. I'm sort of setting. Everybody knows what happened. Everybody, who here has not ever looked at the book of Esther? If you haven't, it's a great story. I love it. But you think keep in mind when you think about this. The events of this chapter take place without anybody anticipating anything. Haman is totally clueless. He has no idea what was read to the king. He didn't know that the king couldn't sleep. And he was waiting outside. Can't wait for the king to wake up. When does his alarm go off? I want to talk to him about hanging Mordecai. He's got the gallows. It's almost finished, and he's going to get his way. And then there's Mordecai. He's sweating it out. He's fasting. He's praying. Lord, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Esther, I could have planned another banquet. Yes, ma'am.
Looking back at Esther 2:21, it talks about those two guys.
Mm-hmm.
And Mordecai found out. He told Esther, and Esther told the
Yeah, so Haman was sort of out of the loop on that. So maybe Haman didn't know anything about it. So, yeah. But at this point, no one knows what's going to happen. Haman, he's got this ironclad plan. I'm building the gallows. I'm the king's favorite. I'm going to get his permission to hang Mordecai. Mordecai doesn't do anything. What does the Lord say? Psalm 37. I love Psalm 37. Psalm 37 says, "Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not thyself because of him who prospereth in his way, because of the man who bringeth wicked devices to pass." Whoa. So this is a message like when I was in high school, if I had known about the Psalms and I could have known about this, rest in the Lord and wait patiently. Don't worry about this guy that wants to beat you up. Because he's got his wicked devices. You got to bring these things to the Lord. Wait patiently for him. Fret not because of the one who's prospereth in his way. Was Haman prospering? Yes. Up until now, he is. Well, think of it this way. The king seems like he never left the palace. Who's the guy that the people see going to and from the palace to his home, back to the palace again? They see Haman all the time. Haman's a busy guy. Oh, Haman's in charge. Haman has the king's ring. Haman is the one who puts these plans into. So Haman is the one who's visible, not the king. So that is, I'm way early. Wow. See, we're in here. We didn't have a lot of discussion go on. In the other room, it's more conducive to. Yes, Tom.
Okay, I just wanted to talk about this one where the king had insomnia. I wanted to kind of literally taking it in this way that it's just a time when you have nothing else to do. It might not only mean like during the night when you wake up and you can't find your sleep, but any time during the day when you don't have anything to do, what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
You see, do you go to the beach always? Do you do this and that always? Or do you get hold of the Bible? I'm one of them. Sometimes I forget that. But we're having a king here who is finding insomnia and is getting it. So anytime when you are off or when you have nothing to do even during the day, morning, afternoon, do you have some time where you get hold of the Bible? That's one. Two, I'm looking at the two guys here who are trying to plot an assassination of the king.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking like, these guys are being heard by Mordecai, planning that. But is there a situation whereby people do plan assassination, but they are not heard by anybody? But there is someone somewhere who is hearing their voices from inside their hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever, it could be hurt, it could be, some kind of jealousy or some kind of something that builds up from somebody from inside. And you say, oh,
Yeah.
God sees that, which is kind of different from this scenario where Mordecai hears that. So I thought that one is a point. Then the other thing is, I don't know, the king is working out and is calling for the book of the Chronicles, which means the remembrance, to be read. Is that coincident or that's the work of God? Try to, I don't know, you can just go around that.
Yeah, and I think what you just said, where did this is the sovereignty of God. This is, the hand of God. And this is, you sort of look back, when you think about it, you mentioned, all of a sudden, he's reading, he's having this read to him. Who picked it? God did. Who was the one who discerned the plan of those two guys who wanted to assassinate the king? God did. Who put it into, and who allowed Mordecai to find out about it? God did. And Mordecai told Esther, and Esther told the king. So now, And, the whole thing has been set up. When you look back at everything else, here it is, the king doesn't know that it was Mordecai until now. And that's a good thing, because if he did, maybe he would have done something to honor Mordecai back when the plan was made known, and done something to honor Mordecai, and then he would have forgotten about it. But now, at this particular point in time, the time when Haman wants Mordecai dead, the king wants Mordecai honored. So you have, Haman's plan, the king's plan. Which one? Whose plan's gonna win? Yes, Bob.
God's timing is always his timing. We think, the king can think, well, A, B, C, D. Mordecai can think A, B, C, D, but God is A.
Mm-hmm.
And his timing works through his sovereignty. And there's all purposes for things that are written in the scriptures that we can follow, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and see how God is working, even though he's not mentioned in this book.
Exactly, yeah.
You see his authority, you see his sovereignty as he continues to work and as you continue to present the lesson.
Mm-hmm. And, you mentioned, you reading the Bible. And this goes back, this is a few weeks ago when I was talking about Esther chapter 4. I laid awake at night thinking, Esther chapter 4, Esther chapter 4. And sometimes your mind works and you can't sleep, and you're sitting there saying, sleep, sleep, sleep. But, I had things run through my head, and when I got up in the morning, I said, I got these thoughts that I had, I've got to write them down. Because sometimes things will come into your head. And I was reading in a book I've been reading, Pilgrim's Progress. It talks about the fact that sometimes, the Lord does speak to you at times like this. Typically, he speaks through his word, and he doesn't give us any revelation that's not already in the Bible, but sometimes he'll bring, things come to mind. You ever had something come to mind that, oh, where did that come from? It happens, and it's like, I didn't plan on this. I didn't know this was going to happen. I had no idea, who planted that thought in your head, kind of a thing. So, any other comments or thoughts? Wow, it's quiet in here. It's never quiet in the other. We're going to get back in the other room. That's all there is to it. It's much more, like I said, much more conducive to discussion. Yes, Rhonda.
Well, I'll speak up. I think it's proven by what we've read so far in Esther that King Ahasuerus liked to abdicate his responsibilities. He listened very eagerly to his advisors when the first queen was concerned, and about the beauty pageant or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
About so many things. Now that night he couldn't sleep. I'd like to think that maybe that was a regular thing that kings did. Someone read the happenings of the day. Maybe they just picked up where it was left off last time. That they were reading the journals or whatever's happening in his kingdom. Was it divine providence that part was read? Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely God's in on that. So that leads me to believe that Haman had, because he did exactly what Haman wanted by this decree or edict to kill all the Jews in the 30 days. So Haman was perfectly confident that he would be able to hang Mordecai
Yeah.
that day, probably. He would be able to do that. The king just not. Because the king's, he just abdicates. He just doesn't want to rule. He wants to be wined and dined.
Mm-hmm. Which goes, you think about it, what did he say to Esther? Esther, tell me what you want. Up to half my kingdom.
That's, by the way, to a man is his stomach, right?
Yeah.
You know where that came from? So, and it just goes to show, too, that pride comes before fall, right?
Mhm.
So he felt pretty fast and hard when it started coming, but he had warning after what happened.
Yes, what's going to happen, don't get into next week, but pride comes before fall. Would Haman, would a lost person reading this, who really doesn't like to ascribe things to the hand of God, would they think that Haman was prideful, arrogant, and overconfident? Or would they just say that Haman was acting exactly according to how he should have acted? Because, like you said, the king abdicated responsibilities. Here, Haman, take my ring and sign whatever you want to sign. Read to me out of the books, why don't you? And, whatever. Haman, what should I do? What should I do for the person I delight in? What should I do? He's making no decisions himself.
It's a terrible king.
And so as you think about it, Haman was fully justified in thinking everything that he thought.
He was doing what an executive would be doing in day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Just in life today. He was doing what an executive person in office would be doing, trying to get closer and closer to the top.
And I think about this, when I was back at the bank and back in years ago, I forget the year it was, but Black Friday, October 20, whatever it was, 1980 something dot. Do you remember? The stock market went like the bottom. Yeah. Yeah. Everything on one day, everything was fine. The economy's kicking along, everything's good, A day later, and this was a Friday, the following Monday, everyone's panicking. What do we do? What do we do? How did this happen? How did this happen? It's the same thing. These things.
Pre-Biden and after Biden.
Yeah. Go to the gas pump. I dare you. But no, let's not go there. What's it cost to fill up the Lamborghini now, huh? No. So, but this is what happens. Sometimes there are things that happen, and the experts will say, well, there were no signs of this happening. We just went through the anniversary of 9/11. How many signs did people miss? Nothing's going to happen. We're fine. The best laid plans of mice and men. I know that's an adage. It's not a Bible verse, but it is based on a Bible verse. The men plan their way, but the Lord, He's got His own way. So, any other comments? Danny, would you close us in a word of prayer, please?
Dear Heavenly Father, we do want to thank you, Lord, for your omniscience, Lord, for your love, for your kindness, your goodness. Lord, thank you, Father, Lord, for your righteousness and holiness, Lord. We thank you, Lord, for your providence. As we look in the book of Esther, Lord, how your hand is weaving throughout the lives and the events shown through Esther, Lord, in ways that we can't even imagine how you've orchestrated this whole thing, bring it out, to bring it to this climax that's going to be happening here in the next chapter. Lord, you're so good and so gracious. Lord, you're not willing that any should perish, but all should come to repentance. Lord, even with Haman, Lord, all the signs that he was given here in this one time, Lord, was happening, going to be happening here in this chapter, and heading into the next chapter, Lord. He just refuses to see those signs, Lord, and just continues to plow them. Lord, I pray you just help us, Lord, to see the signs that you're showing us, Lord, in our lives, that we would not continue going through things that we don't need to be doing, Lord. You're trying to show us that we need to stop. Lord, help us, Father, Lord, to be a testimony and a witness, Father, of Jesus Christ to those around us, Lord, our co-workers, Lord, those we may meet in the grocery aisle, Lord, at checkout, Lord, at restaurants. Lord, help us, Father, to ever proclaim Jesus Christ, Him crucified, buried and risen, and seated at your right hand, Lord, interceding for us. Lord, now I pray this bless the service to come, for I pray Christ be glorified. Thank you for it in His name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.